I'm really excited about tonight's keynote by my colleague and friend, Peter Horan. We've had a chance to work on a few things this last couple of years, and we always see each other at big events and shared some good jokes. So tonight, we're going to hear from investor, operator, and advisor, Peter Horan, with a history of building successful media, commerce, and ad tech businesses. He formed Horan MediaTech Advisors in 2014 as an umbrella for his investment and consulting activity, where he currently works with and/or has investments in AdZerk, Antenna, Lending Tree, Outdoor Project, ShopPad, Spirited Media, just to name a few. And I'd also like to welcome Pam Horan here tonight as well. We're visiting Ben for a few days, and maybe they'll move here one day, we don't know. Just had to put a plug in for that. So let's hear more about this history of yours, Peter. Thank you for being here.
All right. And I will try not to tell jokes that require me to raise my hand when it's funny. So in the course of tonight's activities, you'll have a chance to win cash. So, yes. And not gift certificates or wampum or bonus buck, real cash. All right, so I'm going to start, though, with a bird box challenge. And you have to close your eyes and operate heavy equipment. But I want you to, sit there and think for a second about Walla Walla, Washington. It's beautiful, it's green, there are hops. Now imagine that the economic center of the universe runs through Walla Walla, Washington. Because effectively, that's what's happened within my lifetime. So what I'm going to try to do tonight is share the sort of unlikely history of Silicon Valley as I saw it. By coincidence, I was born in 1955, which was the same year as Bill Gates and Steve Jobs. And we were kind of all kids coming up at the same time. The first brush with technology for me, I wrote the owner's manual for Pong, the first home video game, in 1975. Yeah, that's always the most popular thing. But I was there, one of the early days of the personal computer business was the West Coast Computer Fairs. And this is when, 1977, and I was out there on the floor selling kit computers in plastic bags. So this is just this is a highly opinionated, no footnotes version of what I have seen over time. And I'd like to say, no nostalgia. This is not about the good old days. But what I'm increasingly concerned about is that we're getting this sort of idealized version of Silicon Valley, and either what it was like or what it should be like, or how you should start up a company, and what investors like me ask you for, because none of that was there in the early days. And I'm not, so my concern is that bad history will lead to bad decisions. And I'm not bitter. I've been part of $2 billion in exits and $4 billion of public market creation. So if I sound like I'm pissed off at Silicon Valley, but I benefited from it too. So I've been on the right side of the curve most of the time. So I'm going to do a non-money warm-up question. Does anybody know what the major source of revenue in Silicon Valley was in the 60s and 70s? Brian Vieira. Hell yes, prunes. But see, and by the way, so Santa Clara Valley shipped 30% of the world's prunes in the middle of the 20th century. So it was known as the Valley of Heart's Delight. It was an agricultural valley. That's why I asked about Walla Walla. So visualize, like I said, literally, that Walla Walla transforms into an area that has a GDP greater than most of the countries in the EU. Because that literally, if you isolated the 3 counties of these, what's comprised Silicon Valley, it's bigger than Norway. It's bigger than Poland. It's bigger than Sweden. That's how much money has flown through Silicon Valley. All right, now, first money question. And there's a 5-second rule. You can't look on your phone. So I know, you're going to cheat. That's cool, but no. What was the company? What's the answer? 42. Wrong. All right, what is the company that put silicon in Silicon Valley? 5, 4, 3, 2. No? Oh, I'm sorry. No. No. No? Shockley Semiconductor. And Shockley was a lunatic. But he shared the Nobel Prize in 1947 for inventing the transistor. In 1956, he decided he wanted to move closer to his mother who lived in Palo Alto, and he wanted to move Shockley Semiconductor to Mountain View, California. One big problem, they didn't have long-distance phone service in Mountain View, California in 1956. So Bardeen and Bratton, who shared the prize, they were not going anywhere out to the wilds of California. But that tells you kind of like how rural this was. In the mid-50s, when I was a year old, there was no long-distance phone service. But that actually was the first semiconductor company in Silicon Valley. Now, what's interesting out of that is he was a terrible manager, which was a consistent theme. He was a lunatic, a terrible, brilliant guy, but terrible manager. And so he started the process of recruiting the best and brightest guys. And so a year in, and they were all guys at that point, the traitorous 8 left and formed Fairchild Semiconductor, which was actually one of the watershed moments in the history of Silicon Valley. And if there's ever like a Mount Rushmore of Silicon Valley, those traitorous 8 guys who are all in their 20s are going to be up there. This is guys like Gordon Moore, Noyce, Gene Kleiner, who went on to find Kleiner Perkins, one of the big venture capital firms. And they all blew up. Within the next 10 or 15 years, those guys founded 65 significant companies in Silicon Valley. And by the way, what's interesting is that when they went to found Fairchild, and this is also true of the whole entrepreneurial culture of Silicon Valley, they went out to raise money, and everybody turned them down. And Arthur Rock, who's a very famous, very first-generation venture capitalist, kept a list of everybody that turned him down. And long afterwards, when Intel and the other companies came out, he would bring out the list and say, yeah, that asshole, he turned me down. This guy turned. So never forgive, never forget. So what I'm going to talk about is 4 abilities that, in my mind, propelled Silicon Valley from being, like I said, the prune capital of the world. If you ever go down there, you still see Prune Yard Shopping Center, Prune Ridge, Prunedale. It's still there on the street signs. But what are the 4 abilities that led to the transformation? And the 4 I'm going to mention are the ability to drive full speed in the dark, the ability to adapt, improvise, and overcome, the ability to eat an elephant one bite at a time, and the ability to embrace your inner barbarian. And since we don't have PowerPoint to keep me honest, I had to go back to retro cards. So start with driving full speed in the dark. All right, money question. What was the first venture capital investment? And when was it? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. In 1909, Stanford University invested $500 with Lee DeForest to create the vacuum tube. So one takeaway is this has been going on for a fair amount of time. And you always get frustrated, as an entrepreneur, you always get frustrated. Everything doesn't happen all at once. And part of the myth is, oh, you start a company, you make $1 billion, 18 months later, you buy a small island, it's all good. But much of this has taken years and generations. Somebody mentioned Hewlett-Packard. Hewlett-Packard is, we talk about the garage. Well, Bill and Dave were the guys that started in the garage. And they had a professor, Fred Terman at Stanford, who said, you really ought to develop a product. And interestingly, their big break came when Walt Disney decided he needed an oscilloscope to test the sound for Fantasia in all these theaters. And that's actually where they got their first big break. But if you'd ask them, did they know that they were going to create a tool that would make the sound better in movie theaters? They said, no, that's not part of our consciousness. And so like I said, I go back to Pong and video games, personal computers, cell phones. I ran the Microsoft ad account worldwide in 1990-91 when we introduced Windows 3.1, all the Windows apps, Office. Was in the very early days of the internet. No consumer ever asked for any of those products except Pong. In fact, I've still got in the garage, I've got focus group notes from 1977 when I was doing focus groups on the Commodore PET, Personal Electronic Translator, which is one of the first personal computers. And people would pound the table and say, under no circumstances do I want a personal computer. I can't imagine that. Cell phones. People would argue with me, I don't need a cell phone. What would I want one of those things for? So, investors will come to you and say, oh, well, where's your consumer research? Do they want this product? There has never been a product that anybody asked for the most part. At least nothing I've been involved in. And these are huge industries. But when you ask people about them before they started, they violently rejected the concept. And that's why I talk about driving in the dark. It's like you can't let that bother you to some extent. The other thing that I would say to you is that if you go back and track the development of technology, you go back to Bill and Dave and the oscilloscope. Then you go to Shockley Semiconductor, and then Intel. Then you go to personal computers, software, local area networking. They're all nonlinear. So one of the other things that people want you to do is be able to project. I want to be able to look at what I got now and say, oh yeah, well, I can just go 10% more, 5% faster, 3% cheaper, and I'll have a business. All of the big step-ups are nonlinear. Was there anything in the first generation of internet that could have predicted Facebook? Can anybody say what the next thing after Facebook looks like? So it's like, and right now, what people want you to do is write a business plan that says, okay, here's how the movie ends. And Silicon Valley was built, I would say, was built by people who were willing to jump off a cliff and trust that they could learn to fly before they hit the ground. Some did, some didn't. But that sort of confidence that, oh no, it's all going to be okay, wasn't there. When, like I said, I was on the floor of that second West Coast Computer Fair in '77, and the two Steves were down the aisle with Apple Computer. And Jobs, a college dropout. It's like, how many college dropouts are there in the business? It's like, well, did you go to a good school? Do you have an MBA? Do you? But the industry, for the most part, was built by people that had no credentials that said it was appropriate to do what they were going to do. And so, as an entrepreneur, like I said, you say, well, am I the right person to do this? Well, what gives me the right? And to some extent, Silicon Valley is by people who basically announced that they had the right to change the world. And there's no external proof. Why was Steve Jobs the guy? Bill Gates got lucky because his mom knew somebody. But for the most part, he went out to Albuquerque. There's still a great photo of Bill being booked for driving without a license. Another college dropout, very bright, but college dropout. And started, I think this personal computer thing is going to be something someday. Maybe we ought to do something. And so that is that, quality to actually, even if people think you're crazy, that's okay. You got to be willing to do it anyway. Second core skill is the ability to, what I say is adapt, improvise, and overcome, which is from the movie Heartbreak Ridge. So you say, where did these cool technologies come from? And we say, well, startups, right? No. Most of the important technology was created by the big labs. It was created by Bell Labs, by Xerox PARC, by NASA. SRI, thank you. Stay tuned. All right, money question. There is a legendary mother of all demos. Who gave the mother of all demos and what year? You're halfway there. All right. No, but not bad. It was a guy named Doug Engelbart at SRI in 1968. No, that's where they stole it from. No, that's where they stole it. No. All right, so now, okay, now go back. This is 51 years ago. And Engelbart, who at the time everybody thought was a crackpot, got up there and demonstrated video projection, remote video, a mouse, WYSIWYG control of a computer, modems, and multiple windows. Yeah, holy crap. And like, it was a 90-minute demo where people said, wow, where the hell did that come from? And Julie says, well, what about the Steves and 74? But in fact, if you go back and look at what Jobs showed at the Mac launch 50 years ago today, by the way, it is basically a cleaned up version of what Doug Engelbart showed in 1968. So again, back to the notion of, what was it, 16 years gap, but all that stuff was out there for 16 years. And so, as much as we love, hip and cool startups, the big company labs invented things like the transistor, semiconductors, cell phones, hard disks. Bell Labs, which no longer exists, shares in 9 Nobel Prizes. And so one of the other things to think about, and this is more of a societal thing than anything anybody in this room can affect personally, is who's doing fundamental research? Who's doing the kind of raw science, put a crack in the sky kind of work? Because if you actually look at everything that's happened in Silicon Valley over the last 50 or 100 years, it was not the result of the kind of work that investors like me ask you for, which is very directed. All right, when are you going to go to market? And what's your time horizon? And is every dollar you're putting into R&D going to turn out to be a product? All of the great inventions that propelled the economy that we know was open-ended, and we got no idea what the hell it's going to be good for. And then along the way, somebody said, whoa, hey, you know what? That's pretty cool. I bet I could do this. And probably anybody here worked at Intel or Microsoft? Yeah, okay. There was this very virtuous circle coming out of the 80s into the 90s where Intel would build a really good processor. And somebody at Microsoft would go, huh, that's really cool. I bet I could choke that thing with new software. And then Intel would go, oh, I guess I better create a better, faster processor. And we marched through the 8088, 286, 386, Pentium, all the way on up. But it was that sort of, you create the power and you go, wait, what can we do with that thing? I know, let's build, But that is a central idea, which is sometimes you've got to build something and then play with it to figure out what it's really good for. Because a lot of the time, you not only don't know, you can't know. All right, money question. You'll get a 20 for audience participation. All right, what significant product that we all know is a spin-off of NASA technology to protect missile antennas? No? No? Good try. Well, okay, last call. No? Not Tang either. No? That wasn't, at least that's not the one I'm asking about.
Aluminum foil.
Invisalign braces. Invisalign braces, they had a problem, which was they needed a coating that they could put onto these antennas that would be, durable, flexible, couldn't absorb light, And then afterwards, somebody says, huh, I know what I can do with that. I can straighten people's teeth. But that's obviously, but that's an example of a significant business, and there are a bunch of others, that sort of came out of, and GPS and triangulation were all byproducts of other things. But people were doing raw science. And then somebody else comes along afterwards and says, huh, I wonder what I could do with that. It'd be pretty cool if I could do this. And so one of the things to think about is cross-applying ideas and technologies. I've done a lot of work with a fellow from MIT, Eric von Hippel. I say he should be like you think he should be a Prussian with a monocle and cowboy boots, but he's actually from Texas, and brilliant guy, and well published. You can find him easily. Does a lot of work on lead users, and we say it's like if early adopters are the pioneers coming across the plains in the Conestoga wagons, the lead users are the mountain men. They're the ones that figure out what are the paths that the people will follow. And usually what he says is it's somebody that's got this burning problem that existing technology won't solve. And so they go look around and say, what other people have had a problem like this that I could steal from? So for example, in the 50s, 60s, cars were getting bigger, heavier, and more powerful. And the brakes didn't work. Oops. So they said, well, gee, who has to stop something big and fast? And they said, wait, how do they stop airplanes? And so in fact, they started to figure out how they could appropriate technology from airplanes to apply to car brakes. He's written some interesting stuff on whitewater kayaking, very dear to the hearts of people in Bend. Same thing, how you build boats that can whitewater kayak. Anyway, but the notion of, oh, I've got to create everything from scratch is sometimes it's like, wait, how can I actually creatively adapt something that exists in the market already and apply it to solve a new problem? I don't know, to tell you the truth. I forget who it was. I think the odds are, yeah, probably. So, all right, the ability to eat an elephant one bite at a time. That's the old bad joke, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? So think about the kinds of projects we're talking about. Like I said, put a dent in the sky kind of projects. All right, but where do you start? How do you take something like big and hairy, and I'm going to change the whole world, and get off dead center? So in the early days of Microsoft, actually, I'll say early days, this is 90, 91, which Microsoft had been around for 15 years by that point. But the mantra at the time was a computer on every desk and in every home running Microsoft software. And at the time, this was purely ridiculous. Microsoft's #1 app at the time was Flight Simulator. They did BASIC and CPM, but they were not, or DOS, but no business would have ever taken Microsoft seriously. And we did research that said, would you like to be able to see on your screen what will print on the paper? Would you like your apps to work together? People said, no, absolutely not. Because at the time, the leading apps were WordPerfect and 123, and they didn't work together, and everybody was just fine with that. And so the question was, how do we actually get people to change the way they think? All right, money question. What is the ultimate killer app? Nope. No, closer. Come on, I want to give away 20 bucks. Solitaire! Come get your money. Hell yeah. Come on down. Woo! All right. So why is Solitaire the killer app? Because people are like, well, I don't know how this thing works. And a mouse, what am I going to do with a mouse? And Solitaire was this addictive, stupid app that was free everywhere that taught people how to use a graphical user interface, how to drag and drop, how to click, that was user training. And people didn't even know they were being trained. But then suddenly it's like, oh, well, actually, I can drag that picture over here, and I can click on this, and I can. But it was so insidious, but it worked beautifully. But one of the things that was really important, and by the way, to tell you how bad it was, so I did the first multi-page ad for Windows and Windows apps. And Windows apps time was Excel and Word. PowerPoint did not rate an ad because it was like, you know, you're buying a set of luggage and that was the shaving kit that they threw in. Nobody wanted PowerPoint. But when I was doing this ad, the first spread was going to be Windows, the second spread was going to be Word, the third spread was going to be Excel. The project manager for Windows would not allow me to show Word or Excel on the Windows spread because, quote unquote, nobody cares about them. What you really have to demonstrate is that this works with 1, 2, 3 and WordPerfect. So now we look back and say, well, Microsoft, they're corporate computing. They're an institution. But at the time, there was none of that. At the time, it was, the IT department hated it. It was like, this is a waste of time and money. Nobody needs that stupid graphical computer. The old 286 running DOS is just fine, thank you. But it was these actual early social media marketing. We went around IT, we went to the influential end users, got them excited about it, got them to demand that they bring in these computers. In a lot of cases, they bought them on credit cards. And that is really the trench warfare of technology adoption. And so as you think about building your businesses, you know, you got this big goal off in the distance. But one of the things to think about is what are all of the little bite-sized steps you can take to sort of chop that problem down to size? Because you don't go from 0 to 50 billion in one jump. It's the one bite at a time approach. All right, I'm keeping you late. So last one. And this one could be a little bit controversial, but it's the ability to embrace the inner barbarian. And you know, they say, you know, the winners write the history. And now, all of us are now old guys. You know, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. I mean, I literally knew Melinda Gates before she was dating Bill. And then it was like secret. You weren't supposed to acknowledge that Bill and Melinda were dating. And now they're out trying to change the world. And by the way, if you actually, there was an article in the Wall Street Journal last week which talks about that basically the approach that I just mentioned about how we rolled out Windows is exactly what the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is using to roll out healthcare. If you, it's like it's like, oh yeah, just substitute words, but it's the same basic approach of how do you actually get adoption, how do you roll it out, how do you get people bought in. And so what is the kind of classic VC approach, is, well, you don't really want to go after an entrenched company. You know, you don't really want to go, you don't want to attack Facebook, you don't want to attack Intel, you don't want to attack, you know, it's like you never go after a leader. Okay, money question. What was the second largest computer company in 1995? No? Nope. Warmer. No? Yes. I didn't see who said it, but $20. Digital Equipment Corporation, second largest computer company in the world, second only to IBM. And now it's a trivia question. And so one of the things that, you know, we always look at industry leaders as if, you know, they're in stone, they're impregnable. Go back and look at the top 4 internet companies of 2005. AOL, Yahoo, MSN. They had like 70% share. And now, you know, who are they, where are they? Verizon is trying to explain away why somebody else bought them for $10 billion. No, it's like, and the, you know, and somebody said Data General. In 20 years ago, which is a long time but not forever, the computer industry was, quote unquote, run by real computer companies that sold real computers to real computer people. And they always use that word never. They said, oh, well, those companies will never do computing on those crappy personal computers. And that's damn near a quote from Ken Olsen, who was the founder of DEC. And whenever you hear the word never, just substitute the word always. Well, no, because this week the question is, well, is Sears going to go out of business altogether? Did Toys R Us go out of business altogether? Because not that long ago, those department stores would say, oh well, people would never go to a big drafty warehouse and push around a flat cart and buy 12 packs of toilet paper. Oh, really? But in their mind they said, no, our worldview is that people want to have real people helping them. They would never do that self-service. And then of course Amazon comes along. Amazon's been around for more than 20 years now. It's not an overnight success. It's 20 years. And originally it was like, oh yeah, that book thing, yeah, the books are okay, but people won't buy anything else. Then it was, well, okay, maybe they'll do CDs, but CDs and books, but they won't do anything else. And now you're like buying lawnmowers and color TVs and cars. Yeah, right. It's like, and so, but the incumbents are notorious for sort of constructing a worldview that's sort of self-referential. It's like, well, our people only do what we want them to do, so therefore we're right. And so, in a sense, and there's a professor at Harvard who I commend to, Richard Tedlow, who's done this brilliant work on basically the evaporation of these seemingly impregnable franchises. Like, Ford, Henry Ford was notorious for sort of saying, hey, you have any color you want as long as it's black. And in about 18 months, Ford went from the #1 car company in America to almost out of business because General Motors said, oh, actually, we do colors. And suddenly everybody's like, oh yeah, actually, you know what? I like colors. It's like, I don't want black. But it's like, but if you'd ask people, the linear regression, well, Ford will only get bigger. Because it's big, it will only get bigger. And in fact, sometimes the bets worth making are the ones that are predicated on the collapse of these big, titans that seemingly can't be touched. Now, what's the culture? And this is one of those things. We all want to live in a kinder, gentler world. But most of Silicon Valley was a fairly barbarian place for most of its life. And now we're trying to get, oh no, forget that. That didn't really happen. In the early days of Microsoft, there was this cultural thing. The first person in, park next to the door. The second person, park next to them. And so on out. And God help you if you went home before everybody between your car and the door, wasn't gone already. So that was not a good career move. I once was, in 1980, so maybe we were 25, I was pulling into the parking lot at Apple Computer. And this is after Apple had gone public, the Mac had been launched, and Steve Jobs was in his big-ass Mercedes, parked in the entryway into the parking lot, just screaming at somebody. And this is back when he had long hair. And he was bouncing up in his seat. The hair was coming through the sunroof. But Jobs was a notorious screamer. And he was famous saying, I invented the Mac. What did you do? But, and Intel, along the way, under the Andy Groves of the world, they were very much a, do your damn job. Not touchy-feely, perform. And so, and I guess what my main point here is about culture. Because, Peter Drucker once said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And when the culture you have when you start your company will be there 20 years later. And I'll give you an example. So in the early days of Microsoft, I would say it's like, what are the stories you tell around the campfire? And Microsoft, the story was, there was 2 or 3 versions of the story. One was the CP/M operating system was a dominant operating system of the first generation of personal computers. IBM went to see Gary Kildall in Pacific Grove to try to license the CP/M operating system for the IBM computer. Gary Kildall says, it's a beautiful day, just like it was here today in Bend. I'd rather go flying than meet with IBM. The IBM guy said, we're IBM, we don't take that from anybody. Got back and said, who else has an operating system? And they went to Bill Gates. And so the second thing was that around the campfire at Microsoft, it was, you know, the only reason we exist is that nobody took us seriously. And if they knew what we were going to grow up to be, they would have killed us young. So can anybody guess what a very public manifestation of that became? Not Netflix, Netscape. No, because Microsoft said, oh my God, this Netscape thing could be really something. We'd better kill it fast. No, but see, where that came from, deep down in the guts, was, well, they made that mistake by not taking us seriously when we were little. We won't make that mistake. I had a chance to speak to the managing directors of Techstars a couple of months ago, and we were talking about culture. And I was saying that it's really important to get culture right when the companies are small. And they're like, oh, small companies have to wear culture. And I said, all right, well, what about Theranos? Well, no, it's like, no, Theranos did not decide to lie about the test results at the last minute. They had decided early on that it was okay to lie to the board, lie to investors, lie to analysts about, you know, hey, fake it till you make it. It's like, if you got to fudge it, so what? And then it got baked in that, hey, you know what? Our culture is one where lying is okay. And so one of the things to think about is, okay, the decisions you make about whether it's how you treat people, how you talk to your board, how you talk to your investors, they tend to get hard-coded over time. And later on, and culture is impossibly hard to change after a while. And so to some extent, you got to actually think about what are the behaviors that you actually want to bake into your culture so that, you know, down the road, and after a while, you get big, you get successful, you don't run the company anymore, the culture does. And so that's, what are the values? It's like, I had a million years ago, I had a client, and one day he says to me, so what's the difference between a man and a lobster? I said, excuse me? He goes, yeah, what's the difference between a man and a lobster? I said, for Christ, I have no idea. He says, well, he goes, a lobster has this shell. It looks pretty good for a long time, right? So it's hard, it protects you, bright and colorful, you know. He said, but then you outgrow it, and suddenly you gotta like give the whole thing up and start over again, and you're naked to the world. Human being, you're born, you got a spine. You grow, you got a spine. You get old, you get fat, you get skinny, you get gray, you die, you got the same spine. And the point is that a good corporate culture you build from the inside out. It's like, oh, our corporate color is blue, and oh, we've got this product, or we've got this thing. A good corporate culture is one where you start on the inside and say, what do we believe in? Who are we? What do we respect? What do we want to do? And then that you bake that, and then you got to live up to that every day. It's like, okay, so every day, do you live that culture? Because then down the road, you're going to hire more people. Like I said, you know, nobody tells the CEO the truth. So you got this big business, and what you need is all the people out there that are basically living the culture, because that's what propels the company forward. Anyway, so that's what I came to tell you. Sort of how the overnight success took 50 years and how it all happened. So thank you.
We'll just do a few questions.
Yeah.
Okay? So a few questions for Peter? Yes.
How have all of those experiences, thoughts, influenced how you are changing as a company and what you're looking at in companies that you are willing to invest in and like what you're asking about?
How have all those changes changed you as a VC and how you make decisions and ask questions?
It's caused me to know that there are different types of opportunities. You know, there's a $2 poker table and a no limits poker table. In many cases, the ideas that are the game changer, the Ubers of the world. Again, I'm not sure that's a good business, but it's a valuable company. But if at the time you'd said, hey, we got this cool idea. It's like we're going to have people who need rides meet up with people who got cars, and we're going to skip the taxi companies. And we talk about a culture that sort of went sideways. But that's one where it's like, it was interesting, but I said, you know what, this is going to require more cash than I personally want to get involved in. And there are sometimes you go, you know what, this is a good idea for somebody else, because the Sequoias of the world, they can make their own weather. They can say, there, yeah, not a problem, we'll put another 50 or 100 million in. You know, companies that have done well in certain categories, like a Credit Karma, has raised $300 million. And so there's some of this where I look at it and go, okay, you know what, that's great, but that's not a game I can play in. But at the same time, I can respect that, yeah, there are some of these are really going to matter.
Dana.
So there's a lot of discussion going on now about, you know, all the VCs and all this. Everybody's looking for, you know, we're going to invest in 10, 20 companies, looking for the money. And there are a lot of articles and such that are coming out, I think, much with what you've been saying. They're more what they're now calling a zebra.
Yep.
What is your feeling about how things are going to move forward in the future? Is it viable to continue having VCs investing large amounts of money and then just kind of leaving ones that aren't making it as a unicorn to fend for themselves? Or do you see things turning a bit to where there is funding going towards what are these zebras, which are real?
Yeah.
That's our mantra.
Okay.
But that grow a little bit more slowly or a little more social conscious and that type of thing, but not going to take off like gangbusters.
Let me try to summarize that. So basically, VCs have traditionally invested in companies that are going to be unicorns. So lots of money, expecting a huge return. What about companies that are a little bit more modest in their return profile, and what do you see happening as trends with that? And we're calling those zebras as compared to unicorns.
The big funds will continue to go for unicorns. And if you want to kind of understand big fund economics, look at Snap. So Snap to this day does not have a business model. No, it's like they got no business model. But they went public at a $19 billion valuation. The investors and the management team cashed out, yelled hot potato, it's now a public market problem. And the public market has not made any money on Snap. But as long as the big funds can sort of power companies into a public market or an acquisition in the umpteen $1 billion, they'll continue to do that. I think then the second thing is like horses for courses. There's a whole other group of investors. I've got a lot of friends in Silicon Valley with $250, $300 million funds that can't play that game. And so they're now looking for more sort of fundamentally sound businesses. And so I think you'll start to see a winnowing process. But the big guys will keep doing what they're doing because they're making a lot of money at it.
One more question. Oh, you all have asked questions. How about you over here? Where will what?
Where am I going to live?
Where are you going to live next, Peter?
I'm Julie's craft project. It's like, when I met her 3 years ago, she handed me the real estate section. We live over in Portland now, and we love it here. But, so who knows?
That is a fantastic end to a great presentation. Thank you. Hey, Peter, I have something for you. So first of all, we got to get a selfie of us with the audience.
We've done this before.
Okay, and then I have a gift for you. So for the keynote speaker, well, I was going to get you a bag of prunes,
Okay.
but our regular...
Those old people can use those.
Yes, exactly. For the metaphor and actual, but so at the PubTalk we always present this tankard, and anytime you come back to a PubTalk, if you bring this, McMenamins will completely fill it up for you. So
Very
thank you
cool.
for being here tonight. Really
Thank you.
appreciate it.